Hello. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this evening's edition of Unlocking Your Truth with Dr. Leslie and also with Corey.
That's me. Hello.
Unlocking Your Truth is a talk show about metaphysics and spirituality. And every week on a Tuesday from 7 to 8 Pacific time, we have the show. And it broadcasts on 101.7 FM across the Fraser Valley from the unceded territory of the Stolo Nation, from a local radio station called CIVL.
CIVL.
But we also pre-record the show and we live stream on YouTube and the Awaken Your Psychic Abilities Facebook group. So you're able to, if you want to, be part of the live audience.
Yay.
And that allows you to join in the discussion and ask questions. So Unlocking Your Truth, if you're a first-time listener, welcome. Welcome to the show. I hope you enjoy it. And to all our regular listeners as well, we hope you do too. And just as a reminder, it is a podcast. It goes out on all the major podcasting platforms, but you can also go to my website, drlesliephillips.com, and you can catch all of the previous over 350 podcast episodes on that website. And so,
for those of you who don't realize that, that's 7 years.
Yes. That's 7 years of doing this podcast, more or less once a week. And so we've covered many topics over the years. And we're doing a kind of experiment at the moment, which is just to see what comes up to talk about on the day, but also open to our listeners to suggest what they'd like us to talk about. So tonight, because we got an email from Nicole who asked if we could talk about parallel lives.
Yes.
That she's new to the subject and she doesn't know anything about parallel lives, and would we please talk about that? So that is what we've decided tonight's show is going to be about, parallel lives. And
are we going to include parallel universes as well?
We could.
Okay. Just checking.
But the main thing is really parallel lives. And so, and to talk about that really, it depends on which perspective you want to approach that subject from, where you want to look at it from. Do you want to look at it from human me? the human me are sitting here on planet Earth in my human body? Or do you want to look at it from a God source perspective? And so I figured we'd look at it from a few different angles and a few different perspectives. But I think it looks different, and how we talk about it is a bit different depending on where we are coming from.
Yes.
So typically, when people talk about parallel lives from the human perspective, this is what they mean. So you are alive right here, right now, listener, and we're recording this show in 2023 on the 4th of July, 2023.
Oh,
so,
it just hit me why we're not getting a large influx of folks. It's because of the 4th of July.
Right, yeah. Anyway, so what I was going to say is, if we look at the subject of parallel lives from the human perspective, meaning you right here, right now, 4th of July, 2023, then what we typically might be meaning when we're talking about parallel lives is that there is another aspect of you alive in a physical body on this planet, on this earth, right now. Meaning there could be a little boy in Africa, or an old lady in Italy, or an Eskimo, or you know, a soldier in the Ukraine, or anything that you might imagine. There could be this other version of you alive on the planet right now. And in this context, what we mean is by parallel life is your higher being, or projecting its consciousness into another lifetime, which is coexisting in parallel to the lifetime that you are living. And those other parallel lives, they're not you, but they're closer to you than a brother or a sister would be. They are emanations of the same higher being. So that's one way of looking at the concept of parallel lives. And they may be very, very different to you. They may have not very much in common to you, or they might. And it just depends, you know, your soul may be exploring a different theme through that other life, a different culture through that other life, a different belief system through that other life, or it could be an overlapping theme. And another way of talking about this is the concept of a soul mate. A soul mate is just what we've said, another emanation, another aspect, another incarnation that is existing on earth at the same time that you are. And is it possible for you to meet one of these soulmates, one of these parallel lives? It's not impossible, you know, you could. And I've heard of instances where that has happened. And I've also had one experience of that myself that I'll talk about in a minute. Now, so people think, okay, well, if that is another me, won't that be an amazing relationship? But just think about your relationships with your siblings. They don't always go so well, do they? And so it can be quite a challenging relationship to meet a soulmate, to meet a parallel lifetime, because in some senses you're glaring straight at yourself in the mirror. And so it can be quite triggering. So those soulmates who may occasionally end up in relationships with each other, then it is a recipe for great potential growth and evolution, and also a recipe for great potential disaster. The one time I've had an experience of this was, I'd say it's about 20 years ago. I was, maybe a bit longer, I was a student doing my clairvoyant training, and I was doing past life readings, and a lady came for a past life reading, and I saw, instead of a past life, a parallel life. And I started describing what I was seeing in the parallel life. And I realized that I was looking at, that her parallel life was my father. And that I was her daughter in that parallel life. And I was seeing all these images from my own childhood and reflecting them back at her to explain this other lifetime that was her lifetime. And it was very interesting because that lady, and she had no reason, but she really liked me. And I remember I was doing this artwork at the time, and it wasn't anything special at all, but she wanted to buy these paintings, and it was, and I think it was because of that connection. She was emanating from the same soul as my father, and there was that soul recognition, that feeling between us. So that's one, anyway, to put it in a nutshell, that's one way that we can look at parallel lives, okay? Another body alive on the planet, same time that you are, kind of overlapping. So sometimes people think, well, if it's, you know, lifetimes, you know, you live for a period of time, you die, then you come back, and they don't overlap, but they can overlap because it's not linear. And so, you know, it's quite possible to go for a past life reading and somebody to say, oh, you were born, you know, I'm seeing a past life where you were living in such and such an era, you know, and you might go, well, that's not possible because I was alive then. But it is possible. It is possible because that's a parallel lifetime. So then if we just widen our perspective a little bit, and I think as I go through this discussion, I'm going to keep widening the perspective. So we widen the perspective a little bit. And now we say, okay, well, we just talked about parallel lives. What about past lives and future lives? And so because we are embedded in time-space reality, we think of them as these separate things. But from the soul's perspective, from the perspective of your higher being, they're also parallel lives. All lifetimes that you have had on this planet or will have on this planet that are projections of consciousness from the same higher energy source that you come from, they're all your parallel lives, because that higher energy source, that higher being, is sitting outside of time and space. And it's all happening at once. All of these projections of consciousness, all of these creations into bodies on planet Earth through past and future history and present time, they're all parallel lives from that perspective. From our linear perspective, sitting in the human body, well, some of them are in the past, some of them in the future, some of them are coexisting. But from the perspective of your higher being, they're all parallel lives. They're all coexisting. So let that sink in for a minute.
Yeah, that's a bit of a heavy concept. But I guess is it something like, you know, when you're tuning into a television, when you have a television set or a radio, and you can tune into as many channels as you want, you're just there, and you just select the channels. But yet, as a consciousness, you're seeing it all at once.
That's a very good metaphor for explaining it. Absolutely. That, yeah, you can think of a couple of different metaphors for the idea of your higher being. One of them could be, I mean, we all go on Zoom and see all of these little photographs, don't we, of all the people in the Zoom meeting.
That's
But it's
another
sort of
one.
like, imagine you representing your higher being, your oversoul, and on the screen, or each one of those squares with a face in it, that's one of you. And that your higher being is able to interact with all of them all at once, communicate, know what's going on, and so on. Another metaphor I use to explain this concept is a disco ball, where the disco ball is a metaphor for your oversoul or higher being, whatever word you want to use. And, you know, that's spinning on the ceiling, and there's beams of light creating little light dots on the floor, all moving around. So if you imagine one of those spots of light is you, and you are receiving that energy, that life force from the disco ball, it's keeping you alive, it's keeping you in existence, you are a reflection of it. And from your perspective, you can see, well, there's another spot behind me, there's another spot at the side of me, there's another spot in front of me, you know, oh, that one's that one's the past, that one's the future, that one's coexisting. But from the disco ball, all of those beams of light are all coming all at once. All of those creations are all happening all at once. So you are the essence of a divine fragment. So in a minute, actually, I'm going to even go a bit wider, but maybe before I do that, let's talk about it this way. So you create lifetimes on Earth, and you also create lifetimes in other realities. So you create lifetimes on planet Earth, but you are multidimensional. And you are infinite. So from another perspective, outside of Earth plane, so we've talked about this planet, and the creations going on this planet. But you're also, your higher being is also creating in other worlds, in other realities. So that could be another planet in a physical body, another solar system, another galaxy, and it could also be other realities that are non-physical or quasi-physical, for example. And from the point at which all of those existences are emanating, you could see them as being parallel. They're all happening all together, all at once. From your perspective, you know, they might appear to be happening at a distance. Oh, it's another world, it's another planet. But time and space are projections of consciousness that we operate from in this earth plane reality. And that's so we think in that way. But from your higher being's perspective, they're just constructs. They're just a set of rules that we operate from on Earth. And so, again, we could think of the lifetimes that you are creating in other realities as parallel lives, if we wanted to, if we want to take that perspective of your higher being. And and ultimately, again, if you think about again your higher being as a light scattering, light projecting. Ultimately, they're all one. Ultimately, all of these lifetimes are one life, one creation, collectively from this higher aspect of your being, all happening in inverted commas parallel. Well, we must go to a break and listen to some ads, and then we will be back. Welcome back to Unlocking Your Truth. And tonight on Unlocking Your Truth, we're talking about parallel lives because one of our listeners, Nicole, asked us to. She suggested that as a topic for the show. And I don't think we've ever talked exclusively about parallel lives.
No, we haven't. I looked today, I checked it out, and I didn't see anything from that.
So we've talked about lifetimes on Earth, and we've talked about lifetimes in other realities that may be physical, quasi-physical, non-physical. We've talked about past lives, present lives, future lives. And so you're getting the idea that there are many dimensions of self. There are many dimensions of self existing in many frequency levels or density levels. So if we think again now about these many dimensions of self, and we just go back to thinking about you, there are many potential timelines that this you can experience, can choose, can traverse. And for all the possibilities and probabilities of you and combinations of experiences that you might be having on different timelines, we can think of that as parallel existences. These other versions of you who've made a different choice and created a different branch in a timeline. Just think about all the many different choice points just that you've had in this life. I'll use some of mine. You know, when I graduated from my PhD, I took a job in Denmark. I had 3 different choices, but I chose to go and live in Denmark. After a year, I could stay in Denmark or go somewhere else. I chose to go back to England. You know, at some point in time, I chose to move here to Canada. And these are all these different choices, but it's like, well, what if I'd stayed in Denmark? Or what if I hadn't come to Canada? There's these potential versions of me who are living that alternate reality. These parallel versions of me who are living that alternate reality, making different choices. And you can go as big and broad and as fine as you would like with this, because it's infinite. This is infinite as well. These different potential timelines and versions. Corey.
Yeah. So I get that we have all these parallel timelines that we could follow. You basically, though, you basically start in one spot. Where there must be a starting point where all these timelines commence from.
That's your higher being, because there are parallel versions. There are versions of you that could be born to different parents, born
that was
in
my point.
different versions of Earth.
Yeah.
So the point that it all emanates from is your higher being.
Yeah, because if you're born to the same parents, then your upbringing would be relatively similar in each of those timelines, and your choices would be would not necessarily have to be the same, but they could be similar. Like, you know, you don't see one where you're become a priest and one where you become a
But you could.
but you could, yeah.
Anything is possible.
Yeah.
Maybe some things are more probable, but all potentials exist. Because that is what the universe is. It's all potentials emanating from one originating point.
So if you pass away in a timeline, do you pass away in the other timelines, or
no, not necessarily.
But all the timelines emanating from that one spot will stop.
Well, but there's other timelines that continue with that particular piece of part of the consciousness that are not are out of the body.
And so there now you have another. I die in this timeline. I continue in these timelines. So I go to consciousness and I come back again. So now I can have parallel lives in 2 completely different sets of timelines.
Sure. So that then made me want to take it to another level, which I just said it actually. And if you want to get into this, read Lao Tzu. He talks about the one thing and the 10,000 things. The one thing and the 10,000 things. The one thing being what we call God, divine source energy, the oneness, the infinite, I don't know, originating aspect of everything. And the 10,000 things are all of these projections of consciousness that we are talking about. So from the perspective of divine source energy, they're all parallel lives. Everything in existence, every being in existence is a parallel life because you're an emanation of that ultimate source. So at that level, at that perspective, everything is a parallel life. The ant that you're seeing crawling in your garden is a parallel life. The rose bush out of your window is a parallel life. The other person that you're looking at is a parallel life. The alien that lands on the White House lawn is a parallel life. So do you see, as we take it from different perspectives and frames of reference, we come up with different explanations of what is a parallel life. So there are these many, alternative selves. And you are also existing in many frequency levels or densities. So if we take the land of the 10,000 things, the human consciousness, and then we take divine source energy and everything in between, I think this is what they call Jacob's ladder in the Bible, by the way, is these different frequency levels. Then there are these many densities of self. And you, this projection coming from ultimately from source all the way down to you, that's existing in all of these frequency bands and planes of reality and all of these levels of consciousness. So we started taking some different perspectives. You exist in all of those perspectives, actually. You're having the experience as the human perspective, but you exist in all of those perspectives. And so there are rungs along the ladder where you are individuated, or where you're in a group consciousness level, or where you're in a quantum consciousness level, and all in between. And that's where you get these different perspectives of what is me. What is me? What realm of reality, encompasses me? And so, ultimately, we might say there's one great oversoul for planet Earth. We might say there's one great oversoul for all humans on planet Earth. And it's like, if you think about a Russian doll as another metaphor, there's the oversoul of 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 the oversoul. And each time that you're moving to a different level of that, you're encompassing more in what you would call a parallel life. So you have physical aspects, you have non-physical aspects. You ultimately are everything everywhere all at once. But this aspect of you is experiencing yourself as human, as separate, individuated consciousness, separated from everything else in this, flesh and bones body. So you're having the human experience. And as a human, you're capable of projecting consciousness, and you are a projection of consciousness. It's a bit spooky, isn't it? So, I want to see if anyone's got any comments or questions at this point. I know because it's the 4th of July that we're recording it, we are been on the ground. How many of our parallel lives have shown up to watch today? Not many, because they've all chosen to celebrate, I guess.
Hamburgers, hot dogs, and fireworks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so can you think of any other angles to this or questions, Corey?
Well, it's actually a lot deeper subject than when you look at it from the surface, parallel lives. And you brought something up that I found interesting. Everything Everywhere All at Once, which of course is the name of that movie that was on and won some awards. But when I looked at some of the words that are around it, symmetrical relationships, parallel universe discovered, parallel lives, parallel life examples, parallel universe versus multiverse. Multiverse is another thing that comes up quite a bit when you're looking at parallel lives and discussions around that. And the big one is there another me in another universe?
The short answer to that is yes. And the way we've been talking about this, it reminds me of some of those, I guess we could call them gems of wisdom. So namaste. I believe that the translation of namaste is the God in me greets the God in you.
The light
That's
in
like
me.
the recognition of you are me and I am you and we are one because we emanate from the divine source. And that is a spiritual practice of compassion and is to develop that realization that all others are other versions of you. And so why would you treat them in any other way but through love and acceptance? And it also reminds me of, I think, that Buddhist teaching of, not to step on an ant, because you're ultimately interacting with yourself. Whatever aspect of life that you're interacting with.
I have a question from Zachary. Zachary says, how do you transverse timeline?
Well, you're doing it all the time. You're doing it every fraction of a second. But there'd be different. I mean, we were saying earlier, it's like every time you make a choice, it's like the railway track coming up to a junction and switching the thing to go on that path or that path. That is you choosing an alternate timeline. But another way to choose an alternate timeline is through healing yourself. So let's say, remember the law of attraction, where you create your reality through the energy that you are. So listen to that again. You create your reality through the energy that you are. So it is the energy that you are that determines the timeline that you are on. So every moment that you might change your energy, you change the timeline you are on. If you change your energy in a significant way, you change your timeline in a significant way. So let's say that you're somebody who's carrying a lot of pain and trauma and fear. That pain and trauma and fear is driving the timeline that you are on. Your reality creation is reflective of the pain, trauma, and fear that you are vibrating with. And now let's say you have an awakening and you say, oh, I think it's possible to heal myself. And you find a mechanism of releasing and letting go of the pain, trauma, and fear. And you find some joy in life. That's you. That's another version of you on a different timeline. You switched timelines. So in my psychic development courses, I am teaching people how to work with their energy. I'm teaching people how to heal themselves. I'm teaching people how to release things from their system. And sometimes we're doing it very rapidly, you know. We might go, oh, well, here's some traumatic things that happened on my timeline, gone, 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 gone. Every time we do that, that person is shifting their timeline. We don't call it that. We don't say that's what's happening, but that actually is what is happening. You know, that's what's happening. So
Yeah.
it's happening anyway, but you can deliberately drive the train and decide which track you're moving on. You know, a train of hardship where more trauma and fear is going to come at you, or a train of joy and fun.
It's almost like having a bit of senility. You walk like Dr. Leslie and I will walk through the park and look, and there's a tree there, and we go, that tree wasn't there the last time we walked through, you know, and there's this massive tree, or vice versa. There used to be a tree there, and you can't get to a point where you recognize transversing timelines if you're staying sharp.
I had that today. I had something implanted into my reality that I don't think was there before. Anyway, let's go to a break and we will be back
Shortly
after these messages. Welcome back, listeners, to this evening's edition of Unlocking Your Truth with Dr. Leslie. We've been talking about parallel lives and jumping timelines and shifting into alternate versions of ourselves, and how everyone else is a reflection of the one consciousness that underpins all reality. So we're getting very deep into I don't know, would you call that existentialism? I'm not sure.
I think so. Yeah.
Yes.
Would,
yeah. So, but usually in the final part of the show, we do like to take listeners' comments and questions. And so if you are listening live, please feel free to ask. And I think there's some comments in
yes,
Facebook.
we've got some questions.
Good. Yeah.
This one's from Brian. So Brian says, so many people who identify as empaths, high sensitivity and high sensitives, is it possible people may actually be picking up on these parallel lives, realities more than they are others, that it hits closer to home, feelings, emotions, and all that entails? People believe it comes from others, maybe from other aspects of ourselves, of which these others can be from. Talk about existentialism.
So it's funny, isn't it, Brian? From the perspective that we've been talking this evening, we could say yes to that, couldn't we? Although I don't know, and let's say it this way, that there's different perspectives that we can take on things, and we might want to ask, how helpful is it to look at it that way? How helpful is it to look at it that way? Because that kind of just makes the dilemma and challenge of the empath even bigger. Because at the end of the day, all of these things as well, they're beliefs, they're belief systems, and it's part of how you create your reality as well, is through your belief systems. And so what I like to say rather about an empath, the type of person that you're talking about, is they can learn to feel better, and they can learn to take charge of their energy. So it's not like that is, oh, I've been born that way and there's nothing I can do about it. They can learn about energy. They can learn about their own energy. They can learn how to be in charge of their own energy so that they feel better. I have a whole big long course on that, which is the Enlightened Empath Clairsentience training program, where And for most of us, you know, okay, think of it this way. Here I am, this point of consciousness here. Think about the Russian doll, right? What's closest to me? This life that I'm living, the characters in this life that I'm living, you know, the world that I'm in. That's the biggest vibrational influence on me, not this Arcturian lifetime from 10,000 years ago, or not this parallel person that I'll never meet in Africa. And so so think of it that way, the shells of the Russian doll, the biggest influencer being what's in my immediate reflection. And so the empath's everyday life is, oh, I just went to the supermarket, I can't stand it. All this, I went to the doctors, I'm feeling everyone's illness. And so, but they can learn how to release the foreign energy. They can learn how to own their energy. It's just about energy and what they're doing with their energy and what other people are doing with their energy at the end of the day. Thank you, though.
So, ready for another question?
Yeah.
This is from Susan. Susan says, would it make sense if I'm having a hard time connecting to spirit, or when I feel far from spirit, that my parallel selves are also feeling not so connected? Hopefully that makes sense.
No. See, it doesn't have to make any sense at all. That's you, the human, with your logical mind, trying to make sense of it. But it actually doesn't have to make sense to us as humans. You know, we have this brain. It's very analytical. It's very linear. It likes to understand things in a certain way. But no, it doesn't mean that every version of you is feeling disconnected. There could be infinite versions of you all feeling different ways and different levels of connection. But what's relevant to you, what's more relevant to you when you're feeling that way is other versions of you that are feeling that way. So for example, if I do a past life reading on someone who is feeling disconnected from source, I may get a variety of past lives come up, and some of them will be other individuals that felt disconnected from source, and some of them might be individuals that felt very connected with source, and then that provides the contrast and greater understanding to you. And so again, it's that shells of the Russian doll. These are the ones that are closest now to the experience you're having now. They're the most useful reflections for us to discuss. So they're closer to you in experience, they're more relevant to you. So there can be an infinite variety of selves having an infinite variety of experiences of connection and disconnection, but only certain ones are directly relating to this you and the experience that this you is having.
Oh, Nicole, you didn't know what you were asking for.
Nicole's opened up a whole can of worms, hasn't she?
Whole can of lives.
Yeah.
Okay, this is from Carol. Carol says, Dr. Leslie, just as changing ourselves changes our timelines, so does it mean when other versions of ourselves change the timeline, we will also feel that change?
That's a good question.
They're all good questions.
And so, of course, everything is interconnected. And when any one aspect of the universe makes a shift, ultimately that affects all of us. But is it a detectable thing? Not necessarily. But let's how can we answer it? Again, it's the Russian doll thing. So let's answer it this way. I've got a couple of answers to this. One answer is only if you pay attention to it. So again, maybe we'll use the past life example of a different, it's sort of like, well, let's say there was a past life. Let's say I'll use an example. I wanted to write a book. So I said, well, what other lifetimes have I lived where I wrote a book and I was really good at it? And then I deliberately went to find them, and I found them, and I said, give me all your knowledge. And I absorbed that knowledge, and then I wrote a book. So that's another self that evolved and developed a certain skill that I benefited from. Now, I am this Leslie, and I'm finite. My infinite soul, it's infinite. I can't fit all of those everythings that I am into this. But I can deliberately go and get bits and pieces of it and make it relevant to me. So that's one answer, and we're kind of pointing at the moon in this answer because it's not, in a way, it's not a simple answer. Another way of it, let's say a close family member passes away. You will get a feeling. It will affect you. You'll get a feeling viscerally in your system. That's kind of another example of, again, another aspect of the one source that's close to you, having an experience that you feel. So what I would say, and maybe a simpler way of answering this, is to say, only if it's relevant for you to feel it. But I would say every time, and here's another answer. Every time you change timelines, you line up with a whole other reality, with a different past, present, and future, and a different configuration of connections to the rest of the universe. And you don't even know it's happened. But that change that you've made has reconfigured things. So I know I'm not answering directly. I could say yes or I could say no, but that's not really the answer. I guess the answer is, it depends. It could do. It might not do. How relevant is it to you? Something like that. How long is a piece of string?
Is a piece of string. Okay, this is from, I've asked for a little bit of clarification on this one from Misty, but I'll give it to you anyway. Is that what I'm doing when I go on a trip, coming up, connecting to a different life?
It can be. I mean, I know, for example, I've been in recent years spending a fair bit of time in the UK. And the last time I went to the UK, I felt like I stepped into a completely different life and embedded myself in a completely different life. You know, different surroundings, different people, different friendships. And then, you know, I came back to Canada and boom, I'm in a completely different life. So yeah, yeah. And even if you think about the context of not going on a trip. So for example, I have a regular meeting with some of my peers every Wednesday morning. And when I'm in it, it feels like that's always what my reality is. That's like my constant reality experience. And so from a human timeline perspective, it's this Wednesday, then it's that Wednesday, then it's that Wednesday, then it's that Wednesday. But my experience of it is the eternal nowness of it. And is that kind of it's another aspect of my existence. And there might be other things like that where I feel, well, now I'm swimming. I go swimming every morning, and that's a sort of eternal isness that I'm doing. So I think that the short answer to your question is, yeah, it can be like that. Yes.
Hey, thank you. This is just an extension of Susan's question. She says, okay, that makes sense because I felt connected with spirit and all of a sudden it stopped. And I feel it with my other selves as well. I don't know how, but I just know that my other selves are also struggling with the connection to spirit. I just need to be patient and keep a positive outlook, and that will be my reality. Would you have any suggestions on how I could connect to spirit again?
Yeah. If you were one of my students, I would tell you to use some energy techniques to work on that. Now, if you've got my book, Intuition and Chakras, you've got 5 energy techniques in there. Or you can download from my website a free meditation with 2 energy techniques. So let's talk about it from the 2 free ones that you can get on the website. So work on releasing what is coming in between you and your divine source. So you can use grounding and centering, which is the free meditation, to release down that you're grounding what is in between you and your divine source. And you don't need to worry about the other versions of you. You just need to heal yourself and make the shift within yourself, and then everything else shifts as a consequence of that. If you have the book, there are other techniques that you can use to help you shift your energy. And of course, we get into more depth about how to shift our energy in some of the other courses in the School of Intuition. Dr. Leslie's School of Intuition. That's the full name of it, because if you Google School of Intuition, you'll get something other than me. Just Dr. Leslie's School of Intuition.
We must sue. Okay, this is from Brian. Brian says, out of curiosity, do I have any other relevant parallel lives going on in this timeline reality I'm in now as we're connecting to the show? I had a little chuckle on that one as well.
I like the way you asked that, Brian. Well, let's see, there is a parallel life coming up, so let's see what we can see about it. Give me a second. Oh, I've got a lifetime in Russia coming up. I've got a lifetime in Russia. And I feel like he might be a man in the Russian military, because what I was seeing was the Russian flag and it was being held by a soldier. And that lifetime, he's experiencing world events from a different perspective than you are. But what I'm seeing him going through is the old world, the old order crumbling around him. The things he thought he believed in, now questioning. I think many people around the world are doing that. And so just questioning the way things are, the way things are run, the way things are decided. And it, wanting to shed the old way to embrace really love and acceptance So I see him sort of is doing something he doesn't believe in, but the doing of the something he doesn't believe in is helping him realize he doesn't believe in it.
Okay, folks. Next week we have an easier topic to talk about, probably something like how do we create world peace, you know?
That'll be a good one. That would be a good one.
Oh,
Maybe we
yes,
should.
yes, it would be, it would be. I keep moving around on my screen. Sometimes I'm higher, sometimes I'm lower. Well, folks, that's it for tonight. And so we shall see you all next week.
All right, bye everybody.